Our message is very, very simple. We want to educate the kids, not indoctrinate them.
She doesn't want these projects in her backyard, in Warringah. She wants them in yours.
What's wrong with Australia today?
For me, it's leadership. There's just a lack of leadership.
We should be energy independent here in Australia. We've got everything.
And it's good to see the community come out and really engage in this issue of parental rights.
You only have one vote, but it's very powerful.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Tripp. Thank you everyone for joining us on Facebook, YouTube and Rumble Live. And thank you for everyone joining us elsewhere. If you're not watching this live, if you're watching this at another time, I'll let you know there looks to be an update that's come through on the Rumble. So if you are viewing us on Rumble, you can chat with us now. If you put your comment in Rumble, we should be able to see it on the screen. We'll test it out today. Maybe if someone's watching on the chat, maybe just put like a test in there or something like that, just to see if we can see those comments coming up. But that will be great because we get a lot of people watching on the Rumble, but we aren't able to normally post the comments that come through on Rumble. But now we supposedly can, so we'll test that out today. And hopefully that works because we've got a very important episode today. But before I get to the special guest, I just want to let you know all quickly, start the show off like we always do, just by letting you know about Buy Me a Coffee. If you want to support what we do here on Commanding the Narrative, you can head to Buy Me a Coffee and support us. It would be much appreciated if you did head there and throw us a few dollars. And also, if you want to get your own Commanding the Narrative merchandise, a t-shirt or something, you can head to xcandidates.tshirts.net.au and you can buy your own ex-candidates or Commanding the Narrative merchandise. I think we're going to have to get a Paul Vallejo t-shirt with a nice NASA logo behind it or something like that at some point, but we'll keep working on the designs as we go along. Also, I want to raise the National Rational Energy Network. Now, that's the group that has been organising the Reckless Renewables Rally. There was one in Sydney. There's also one in Canberra recently. They're moving forward, and I'm actually have been included in what they're doing. They've asked me to help with a lot of the things that they're doing, which is exciting for me and hopefully exciting for everyone because we've got some big events planned, and I can let you know about those in the coming weeks. But what they're doing at the moment, this has just started. It's actually a photo competition. So if you want to head to nren.com.au and click on the top link, it just says photo competition. What they're doing is if you can take a photo of the environmental destruction that's happening as a result of renewable projects, you can enter this photo competition. Now, the entries will be finishing on June the 1st. So you've got, still a few weeks time to capture some images. No photoshopped images, no doctored images. These need to be real images of what's happening out there. We want to see what is happening on the ground in these communities. If you can take a photo of some horrific destruction of what's happening to our precious landscape here in Australia, you can enter this photo competition and have the chance of winning $1,000. So that's a really exciting and great initiative, I think, because the left do that sort of stuff all the time, and now the right are starting to come together and push back and have their own competitions, which I think in this circumstance is important because this is a lot of these projects are taking out a lot of prime agricultural land and significant biodiversity corridors in Australia, and those need to be protected. So hopefully this will go a long way to do so. And we've got our first comment on Rumble. Thank you that the test has come through. So that's working. So you can now comment on Rumble. Thank you very much. So first, before we get to our very special guest, I wanted to bring in Paul Vallejo. Now, you should all know Paul by now because Paul's appeared on many of our former episodes. So welcome, Paul.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you.
I know you're a star now. You just recently on the Graham Hood and John Larder podcast. So head over there and watch Paul talk about nuclear energy. How was that one?
Yeah, it went really well. It was a fabulous group of folks. Will's an inspiration, and Adi is deeply knowledgeable in this field. And Graham and John were awesome. It was a wonderful opportunity.
I should also bring up just a special quick shout out to Victor, who I had on last week. Now, Victor DL wrote this article about informed consent. Now, the US has passed legislation to remove informed consent and bypass the Nuremberg Code. His article has gone viral. We spoke about him being published on the Brownstone Institute and Spectator Australia when I spoke to him. But since then, he's been published on InfoWars, Epoch Times, Zero Hedge, a whole bunch of websites, particularly in the United States. So big shout out to Victor. He's doing some really tremendous work and tremendous writing and publishing to get his information out there on a lot of important issues. So thank God we have people like Victor, and thank God we've got people like our special guest, Rosemary Marshall. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on.
No, it is my pleasure. You also in the limelight this week. You were a special guest on a podcast in the United Kingdom. Is that right?
Well, no one was more surprised than me when I got a 3:00 call from Jackie Devoy inviting me to go on her program in 3 hours from that point. So it was a great flurry of activity while I prepared myself and got my mind in gear. But I was thrilled to be able to do it because the Forest of the Fallen is quite a unique opportunity to share the stories of people who've been injured. They've got something similar in the UK. But before I go any further, I would like to point out to the audience that if they'd like to see more, both of the little videos that I make and the other people make, if they go to Forest of the Fallen official on Instagram, and also they have some of our videos on Odyssey. But it is a unique thing, and Jackie, she has quite a big audience. She's an interesting woman. She's been involved in this whole COVID debacle herself because she lost her father. It was a bit of a story, so I won't divert onto that right now. But she was saying that they have the yellow card people over there, and these people have large signs where they stand in lines down roadways, and they make their point with comments as people drive past. And they, like us, are getting a lot of support. When we started doing the forest, which was September last year, I think it was about September, wasn't it? Because Paul's been a great help. And I do want to shout out to all the people who do help. I know some of them are watching today, and really it makes the whole thing such a special experience. I mean, it's always hard talking about this terrible subject, but when you have a camaraderie of people coming along to help, and they're people who are sensitive, who understand, and our hearts break for the people who've been hurt. Because frankly, the people who have been were probably the best of us. They were the people who were the most worried about making sure that other people were safe. And they listened to what the government and the media had to say, and they wanted to do their part. And they've suffered horribly. What does make me very sad now is that when I do meet people, there's often a sort of sad resignation about them, which I do find particularly touching. And I think it helps them to talk about what's happened to them.
Now, before you go on, Rosemary, maybe we should set the table. Firstly, what is Forest of the Fallen for people that don't know? And when did you first find out about it?
Well, Forest of the Fallen is a display, and I believe there are 144. It really is a very moving tribute to the people who've been injured or tragically who've died. What it entails is Selkie, this marvelous person who had the idea, she produces a huge file, which unfortunately and heartbreakingly is increasing. She produces this PDF, and we maintain our forests by continuing to add. And then we laminate these individual stories, which have been submitted by individuals or else are from Jab Injuries Australia with their permission as well. And then we mount these on bamboo sticks, and I particularly like doing them on the beaches because there's something so stark about seeing these people who can't go to the beach anymore. And obviously, because they're on the beaches, we have quite a lot to do with the surf life-saving clubs and the nippers and people. And I think these are iconic areas of Australia, and our culture clash horribly with what's happened to these poor, darling people. Actually, I've got a lot of lifesaver stories if you want to hear some of those, because many of the lifesavers who were mandated have come and spoken to me. And that's particularly heartbreaking.
One of the big troubles is that these stories aren't televised anywhere else. The mainstream media, the political landscape have done their best to sweep it under the rug. You could argue that's because in many ways they were complicit. They mandated the jab. They said it was safe and effective, and it's not been either. And the medical professionals have also been told that they might lose their license if they talk badly about it. So how do you find out about these tragic cases unless there's something like the work you've done?
Well, the Forest does very, very well. The idea is that people can wander through silently and just read the stories and understand how much these people have suffered. But it's been a very, very interesting and unique experience for me. I was enormously frustrated and angry at what was happening, because I got the heads up back in March 2020 that something was not right with all this. And as it progressed, my rage increased. Anyway, Paul and I both worked on Dr. Philip Altman's campaign for Manly, which was another story. But Dr. Altman is also someone who's worth following, because he's a worldwide renowned expert on this subject, as he's had 40 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. But it gave us a means for feeling like we're doing something, and there's no doubt it is useful. I mean, my very first person I met, and it was a baptism of fire, I remember it was on Shelley Beach, and we just finished the installation, and we were standing there thinking, well, what happens now? And this guy came up to me. He would have been 45, and he was crying, and he told me that he'd had a brain injury from his, and he literally, okay, I get emotional about these people. His head dropped on my shoulder in tears, and he actually said, the worst thing is I vaccinated my 12 and 10-year-olds.
Oh, no.
So, we do reassure people, because these injuries do often happen very soon after. And of course, there are things people can do that would ameliorate their redeeming their immunity. But that was shocking, really. And the stories, people say, oh, that's anecdotal. I was just saying before to Stephen, this anecdotal thing's thrown around a lot. When I was at Bilgola Beach about a month ago, this poor man was walking through, and again, he was crying. And I sat down with him on the bench, and he said, oh, my niece who was visiting Italy took her second Pfizer. She was healthy and she was 27. And half an hour later, she'd collapsed and died. And I guess one could say that was anecdotal, because she's not saying it herself. But I don't know how anyone could doubt his genuine grief. And of course, there are lots of other stories of people who actually tell me what happened. Actually, the very next person I met that day was a man who'd had 2 heart attacks and a stroke within 20 days, and they were trying to tell him there was no evidence that it was from the vaccine.
For my part, you both know my partner Stephanie. Her brother Daniel got the shot one day as mandated by his employer and suggested by the government, and he had chest pain that night, 6 trips to the hospital, tachycardia, myocarditis, gaslighting doctors who would refuse to. They said, "Oh, that pain in your chest, that's just psychological. Let's book you in for your second shot." And I said, knowing Dr. Peter McCullough's work and some others, go get a D-dimer test. If it's just psychological, it'll show up normal. And his D-dimers were 10 times normal. And so that clear, direct, irrefutable evidence that was not psychological. And after over a year, he got a diagnosis of vaccine-induced myocarditis. And, we can only hope that that's something that will resolve. There was another friend of mine whose whose son's best friend went with this person's son to go to get their booster. And he was in ICU with a brain bleed within 6 hours of the booster. And that particular friend had given me a lot of grief about not taking the thing that was safe and effective. And yeah, it's now this whole thing about something being anecdotal. I mean, I suppose in a world of 9 billion people, someone's brain, springs a leak any particular day, even if they're, healthy and 28-year-old big wave surfer. But it's extremely rare, and the government doesn't want to collect the statistics. I've seen many cases where people try to report, doctors will not report because they are so there's this pressure from both the media, the government, and the doctors to not report the thing that will come back and bite them.
That's why it's so dangerous when things like these become politically
Yes,
politicized, because obviously you're presenting people that have died or have been injured by these injections, and they're still trying to say there's members of parliament that are still saying that they're safe and effective.
Right.
It's absolutely shocking. If you want to go and have some watch some testimonials from the Forest of the Fallen official, I know that Connor, who's a 28-year-old friend and the son of a friend of ours, he did a video with Dr. Altman, and that's featured on the Forest of the Fallen. He's a very brave young man. Actually, I've got quite a story about Connor. He had his second injection and became very unwell. And he was a young man who was running for 10Ks every day and had absolutely no health problems. Got the second injection, and from that moment on was ill. He's incurred $100,000 worth of medical bills, and to this day it hasn't been recognised what's caused it. Anyway,
and he still can't stress his.
No, and look, can I just tie in with a bit more of the story? When I got the latest 105 stories from Selkie, which I had printed at a local Mona Vale printing place, I went to collect the PDFs, and the printer was in tears. He was so upset having read these, and he just said, "I'm not charging you." So obviously I was grateful. So I took these tragic stories off, and I walked around the corner and nearly tripped over a sandwich board inviting me to come in and have a COVID injection.
Yeah.
So I went into this pharmacy, and I spoke to the pharmacist, who was a very cordial elder man, and I picked up Connor's PDF and showed it to him. I stood there saying, "This is what's happening to the people you're injecting. Are you aware of that?" And this pharmacist took the PDF from my hands and looked at it and read it. He said, "Oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. Oh, he's saying he's getting 10 times worse." And I'm saying, yes, he's my friend, and his mother's my friend, and everyone's really, really upset that no one's recognizing what's happened to him. And the picture of him is just harrowing, because he's lying on a hospital bed covered in those things that check your heartbeat. I mean, really, really sincerely awful story. And he's looking at that and saying, "Oh, well, yes, I did prefer what is the one that's made from the protein base? The other,
AstraZeneca.
Novavax. Yes, I would have preferred the Novavax, but here he is injecting Moderna and Pfizer." And I just looked at him and I said, "Well, what's going to happen now?" And he said, "Oh, well, thank you for what you're doing." And he's still injecting these people. I mean, I just find it, I'm lost for words, in case you hadn't noticed. I'm lost for words. But anyway, Connor still to this day hasn't had satisfactory result, because the medical profession won't admit that he's been damaged by the vaccine. He's very typical. Just in day-to-day life, I've met people who've been vaccine damaged. But there's another man, Gavin, who I met last Saturday at Coleroy, and he said the moment he got his AstraZeneca, he was 49 and a half, and he was a hale and hearty man. He's a skipper on the boats in Sydney, and he was mandated to have these vaccinations. And he said the moment he got these, he felt like someone was sitting on his chest and his heart was fluttering. He said, "My heart shakes the whole time." I mean, I can't imagine living with that, because the fear of feeling your heart shaking all the time just makes you feel like you're on the precipice of something hideous happening to you. And he was one of the few people who expressed well, he was very controlled and wonderful guy, but he was angry, unsurprisingly. But, I'm struck by so many of the people I meet. Like, for instance, I met this lovely young lifesaver. That was at Palm Beach, typical young girl, beautiful lifesaver, committed to the community. And she came over and she was looking at the PDFs, and she looked upset. So I went over and I started talking to her, which is what we're inclined to do. Sometimes people prefer to just look and not speak, but I could see that her emotions were getting the better of her. And I went over and said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Oh, I got Hashimoto's from this." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." She said, my twin sister, got Graves' disease, which is much worse. That's a horrible autoimmune problem. And when we were at the AMP symposium on Tuesday, which was a remarkable collection of the best people in Australia, along with Dr. John Campbell, it was an amazing event which I was privileged to go to.
So we should let everyone know what's the AMP.
Australian Medical Professionals. They held this symposium while Dr. John Campbell was visiting Australia. It really was the most incredible privilege to be there and to listen to the people. But they were pointing out all the organs in the body that might be affected. And this poor girl, I can't imagine what she feels like, because Hashimoto's and Graves apparently are one of the most common side effects that the autoimmune system is affected with as a result of these. So, these are the sort of stories we're hearing. And were you at Curl Curl with us that day?
I have been at Curl Curl with you.
Yeah, well, at Curl Curl, we went along there a couple of weeks ago and saw the clubhouse flag at half-mast. And I went down there and got talking with one of the lifesavers. Of course, they were mandated. And they were all absolutely devastated because the week prior, one of their much-loved members, who was 53, still helping in the surf and rescuing people, committed to the organisation. He had been out running and he just dropped dead of I think it was a cardiac arrest. He's much missed at Curl Curl, apparently. And, of course, I don't know if it was vaccine-induced. One doesn't. But as Peter McCullough says, with the deaths that are happening to people who are unlikely to die normally, the very first question we should be asking now is, what is their vaccine status? This man's left an 11 or 12-year-old daughter. I just can't forget these people, which is why I keep doing what I'm doing.
This is one of the things that should be done is investigations. One of the things, not only are these things not discussed in the media or by politicians, but we can do autopsies and stain for spike protein. And this is, do you know the story of the dog that didn't bark? Is this familiar to either of you?
No.
It's a Sherlock Holmes old story. It's basically how he figured out who the murderer was that the dog barks at everyone except for a couple of people. And when the murder happened, the dog didn't bark, and therefore Sherlock Holmes knew who the murderer was. Here in this case, the fact that the authorities will not investigate, they will not do autopsies, they will not collect these questions could be answered by the collection of statistics.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're saying, well, this is, people are criticizing this is just an anecdote. Well, okay, fine. Turn my anecdotes into a statistic, and then we can know for sure. Exactly. And the way you know that this goes against the narrative, the official narrative, is because they don't collect the statistics. And it's the dog that didn't bark that will tell you what the real problem is.
Well, talking of statistics and talking of autopsies, I had an unusual situation, about 6 or 8 weeks ago. I had to have an endoscopy. And to have that done, I had to have blood taken at the local pathology unit. So, I went, spoke to a young male nurse, and I can turn the conversation around to vaccines very easily. It's become an art form with me now.
Good for you.
Anyway, I went in to have this blood taken, and I said to the young male nurse, "Gee, a lot of sick people out there. They all look very unwell." And he said, "Oh, yeah, very unwell. They all look bad." And I said, what's causing it? And he said, "Oh, I don't know." And I said, "Oh, is it COVID?" And he said, "Oh, no, it's not COVID." Anyway, we got on. I said, "Were you made to have the vaccine?" And he said, "Yes." And he wasn't happy because he got COVID. And he said, "This seems to be something that's not uncommon. People have trouble with their legs with these vaccinations. I've heard of it before from other people. And he said, yeah, my legs went really funny and I couldn't walk properly for ages. And I said, are you speaking out about it? And he said, oh, I don't want to lose my job, which is obviously what all of them are feeling.
Yeah.
Anyway, I cut to the chase and I said, do you find sometimes it's hard to get blood out of people? Are you finding that their blood's clotting? And he said, well, sometimes I can't get blood out at all. But that was a shocking revelation.
Wow,
Shocking.
can't get blood out at all.
No, and I have witnessed people walking around with a series of little round Band-Aids up their arms, and it's made me wonder if that's what's happened.
You know, I just want to say something, because you mentioned how he didn't want to lose his job, and a lot of people say that they don't want to speak out because they're afraid of losing their job. Well, I lost my job, and in saying that, I was in a fortunate financial position where I could probably get by a year without facing the real consequences. And I know a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, and they can't really afford to lose their job. But I just want to appeal to people: if you're afraid of losing your job, you stand to gain so much more for standing up for what you believe in, and standing up for what's right. And things do have a way of working out for you.
Not always. I can tell you another anecdote. Continuing my saga with my endoscopy, which actually came to nothing anyway, so I paid about $600 for no good reason, which irritated me. Anyway, I went to the day centre surgery, and there was a really lovely, exuberant young receptionist there. Well, young, 45 was young compared to me. And she was very friendly, and she was walking me down to where I was going to be all the paperwork was going to be done for my admission for day surgery. And, I gave her the usual spiel, a lot of unwell people, a lot of, everyone seems unwell. Anyway, she started opening up to me, and she said, oh, well, I've been unwell too. And I said, was it the vaccine? She said, yes, she'd had 2 Pfizer. And again, her legs went really funny. And she said she had an autoimmune issue that had really reared its ugly head and made her really struggle to work. And she's got two kids who I think they're probably in their 20s, but both of them are, I think they were both autistic, or certainly had that kind of problem. So she was supporting them. She was a single mother, and she was crying. She said, I'm really scared I'll lose my house. I'm so exhausted, and I can't work more than 2 days a week now. But just as if that wasn't bad enough. I mean, and she said to me, I told her I did the forest, and she said, oh, please share my story. So I'm sharing it for that lovely person. But she also elaborated, and she told me how, talking of the autopsies, as we referred before, that they're doing autopsies on young people. And her words to me were that they're finding gloopy blood clots in their brains, and they're now medicating 12-year-old children for heart problems. So these are the sort of things that she's witnessing. And she was certainly terrified of losing her job because she'd be homeless. And a lot of people are feeling like that. I did ask her, I said, look, how about if all of the people here who are awake really stood up and said, we're not going to work anymore unless we all come clean and say what's happening. And she said, oh, look, people really won't do that. They're all too scared of losing their jobs. And also there is a tremendous stigma about being an anti-vaxxer. And actually, interesting, I was looking into this anti-vaxxer thing here in Australia. It seemed to really start in earnest back in 2014. And that was the year that they started promoting no jabs, no play for children who had to be vaccinated to attend preschool. And to my mind, that's not informed consent, saying to parents, you're not going to be allowed to have any compensation towards your childcare costs unless you inject your children with what we tell you to. I mean, none of this is sitting right with me anymore now that I've started looking at it. Yeah. And this is where the whole anti-vax thing came from, and it's just escalated. It's so inappropriate to have that kind of attitude.
Yeah, I didn't question vaccines until 2020, when I saw what they did with the early testing of the off-patent treatments, it was entirely clear to me that this wasn't based on science. And informed consent is a very, very important word. There's informed, which means that that you know what the risks are of what you're doing, and of course, what they have done is controlled the narrative over the damage. They've prevented doctors from reporting on the damage. They've prevented people from discussing their injuries in the media, which leaves only organizations like Forest of the Fallen to try to inform people in word of mouth. So you don't have informed, and then of course consent. That the idea that you would mandate an injection. And the other thing is that there have been lies about, like, for instance, they told us that the vaccine wouldn't leave the injection site. But then, in Freedom of Information Act requests from Japan, they found that the mRNA biodistributes all throughout the body, collecting in organs that are predisposed to hold lipids, fat.
Because the mRNA is on the lipid nanoparticle, so it travels through the bloodstream.
Travels through the whole body. So saying, when they said it stays in your injection site, that was a lie. When a number of other things they said about it were also
so lots of lies. Are we allowed to mention the thing that rhymes with pectin?
Yes, you can.
The thing that rhymes with pectin, yes. Well, the lies about that were just stupendous. And I've got another little story about that, because Rob and I went off to the GP yesterday, and we told him that we're going to Kenya and we're going to be doing a lot of swimming in rivers, as if. And of course, river blindness is prevalent. So we told him that we're going off to Kenya, we're going to be swimming in lots of rivers. So could we please have some ivermectin, because we know that stops river blindness. Anyway, he virtually sort of leapt back from us with fright, and he said, I'll have to look into that. And I said, well, it's been available since May 2023, I think. And if I'm going to be at risk of river blindness, surely I can have some ivermectin. He said, oh, well, there have been problems with that because people believed that it might have solved the COVID. And I said, well, funny thing is that it would have. And if you care to look into Pierre Corey and Tess Lowry, both of whom are eminent doctors, you would find out that they're telling the truth, and indeed it did stop it. Anyway, he said that he'd have to investigate before he provided us with any scripts for it. But he's someone who's
buy it for
going to
your
be
horse, at the local saddlery or veterinary, but for caring for humans. See, that was one of two major off-patent treatments that were tested wrong reliably. So with hydroxychloroquine, it's a 400 milligram a day normal dose. They tested it at 2,600 milligrams on day 1 and 800 milligrams on day 2 through 7. They tested it at the wrong time. With ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, they both gave it as late as possible. There was a chart on Pierre Corey's website of the differential between how they tested molnupiravir, which was right after someone got sick, and ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine way after you got sick. And lo and behold, one is not shown to be effective. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, if I took aspirin today for the headache I had last week, it wouldn't work either. It's that ridiculous. It's that in your face. And the news media should be calling that out and says, you can't test something a week
and
later.
I'm not surprised, because they've done the same thing with vitamins throughout the decades.
Can I say something about the media?
First, before we get on to that, I just want to bring up this comment, because you're getting some love in the people that are watching. This is from Peter. It said, thank you for putting the spotlight on this attack on the world's population. So there are people that are appreciative of what you're doing with Forest of the Fallen and speaking out about all these things. But I want to ask you, what led you to this? Like back in the end of 2019, just before COVID had hit.
Well, I had experience of a flu injection in 2018. I was going over to England to visit my sons and their families, and they've got small kids, and I was very anxious not to arrive with any bugs to spoil Christmas with them. So I thought, right, I'll have a flu injection. I'd never had one before. So I arrived, and about a week later I had pneumonia and pericarditis. So I didn't have a very good Christmas. Wow. And I was very sick. In fact, I mean, I now understand how severe pericarditis is, and I would say probably the outer lining of my heart has been scarred, but doesn't stop me having enough heart to keep doing this, because I'm really angry about what happened to everyone else. So that was 2018, and I thought, well, that flu jab was definitely a bad idea. And then when 2020 came along, my husband and I were planning on a cruise, and we were going via Kenya, and we might really indeed have been swimming in rivers in Kenya at that point. But we were going to the UK by ship, and we literally had 1 foot on the gangplank, and we got the message saying the cruise is off. This was March 2020. And of course, in order to go, my doctor had prescribed both hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin to us, and I'd said, oh, I'd had malaria stuff before, and I thought it made me go a bit crazy. I said, oh, I don't really want to take this. And he reassured me. He said, look, billions of people are taking this. It's perfectly safe. So I went off and I got the script, no questions asked, and off we went on our supposed trip. Anyway, next thing, of course, is we're sent home again. And then I'm hearing that hydroxychloroquine, there was a man, Didier, in France, who was saying that cured COVID. And then I was hearing about ivermectin, and I saw the presentation that Pierre Corey made to the Senate describing how ivermectin was the thing to use. So I went back to the doctor who'd assured me how safe and marvelous this stuff was. And I went in there and I said, oh, well, could I please have more of those scripts? Anyway, he again, not the same one that I saw the other day, it was a different one. He sort of recoiled in fright and said, oh, I can't do that. No, it's not safe. And I said, well, it was safe 6 weeks ago. What's changed? And then he said, oh, well, it won't work and it's dangerous to take it for COVID. And I said, oh, come on, I don't believe you. And look, I'm one of those people, once someone lies to me, I don't forget it. And then the conversation ensued. He said, oh, well, the chemist won't give it to you. And I said, well, he gave it to me 6 weeks ago. Why won't he give it to me now? So at that point, I thought, right, these people are lying. And he looked scared. And I had a few more communications with him. And I have to say, that particular GP is fully aware of what's happened, and they are still vaccinating in that clinic. They are still doing it.
I want to go off topic just very, very quickly, because I like to promote people around the world that are speaking out, not just against COVID and the mandates and the vaccines, but other issues as well. This is a website in the UK and Europe. It's called facts4eu.org. Now, the chairman of this website is Lee Evans, who I've interviewed before. And he's only just published one of my articles today. So just before I came on, he published this article. So now I can say that I've been published in the UK and Europe. But I want to bring this up now because Lee's made a comment in the chat. He said, "G'day from Europe. As someone with multiple tumors, I came under massive pressure to be vaccinated. I resisted simply because intuitively I had doubts about relatively untested vaccines," which I think is a fair assessment. That was my assessment at the time. There's no possible way they could have tested these adequately before they're rolling them out on the population.
No.
What are your experiences talking to people? How many people felt pressured into doing this?
Most of them. I would say most of the people, so many were forced by mandate. Gavin was forced by mandate, of course, the guy who spoke on their page, on Forest of the Fallen page. Yeah, I'd say that most of the people felt compelled, either socially or by their work, and for fear of losing their job and their livelihood, and their children were at school, and paying, the expenses now in Sydney and everywhere are through the roof. But there are a couple of other things I'd like to talk about. I hope.
Yeah, this is an open forum. So
well, I'd like to talk about politicians for a moment, because I'm not sure who I dislike more, politicians or the media, because I've got stories about both.
Or doctors.
Well, I think the pecking order is probably media, politicians, pharmacists. I'm not keen on pharmacists. But anyway, let's start with politicians. Dr. Sophie Scamps came along to Newport. This would have been about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I was delighted to meet her. And she was very, very civil, very empathetic, very interested.
So she's the member for McKellar.
And I thought, as a doctor, it was great that she turned up. And she read lots of the PDFs, and we chatted, and I explained all about how many people I'd met, and what an incredible experience it was doing this, and the sad stories and the damage being done. Oh, she was all ears and could not have been more supportive. Anyway, I said, well, Dr. Altman, who frankly is my hero, I said, well, I know Dr. Altman will go off and will come and meet with you, and I'll arrange for a meeting. I'm seeing him tomorrow at another meeting, and I'll mention it to him, and he'll be happy to come and speak with you. And she said, oh, yes, that'd be great. That's good. But anyway, we wrote to her, and her assistant wrote back and said that Sophie was going to be in Canberra for a week. And anyway, I followed what Sophie was up to. And when she came back, I wrote again and said, oh, we're still coming to see you, aren't we? And she wrote back and she said, oh, I'm actually concentrating on the result of the lockdowns on children and on domestic violence now. But, I am very worried about what's happening. So, thank you for making contact with me. Or needless to say, I haven't written back. But it's this sort of thing. All these politicians know the Australian medical professionals have sent a book to every politician, Too Many Deaths, and it's a harrowing read. All of them know, but all of them are obfuscating. And one of the things I'd really like to say is that I feel like these politicians are manacled to their parties and what their parties tell them to say. But I think the Australian public is smart enough to have woken up to so much of what's gone on. We see through this. And I don't know why all these politicians, perhaps this is sounding naive, because I don't really understand the whole machination of politics and parties. But these parties are so far wide of the mark now, so entitled, so malignantly stupid that I wouldn't want to be involved with any of them. I actually think a lot of these politicians would do far better if they just dissociated themselves from parties, stood on their own, listened to what people said, and then represented us. I don't see what the problem is with that.
It's a very nice idea. I wish that would happen.
Well, you said a key word, represent. And that's what they're meant to do. They're meant to represent us, not their party.
Not representing
or
us.
Their donors, the people that are funding them behind the scenes.
Well, do they need donors? How does this work? Can they not stand on a soapbox and say, this is what I believe, and if you believe in what I believe, vote for me? I mean, if ever, God forbid, I entered politics, that's what I'd be doing.
Well, one big issue is a lot of these politicians promoted the vaccine quite publicly.
Time to say sorry.
Well, is it a case of saying sorry, or is it more that they're scared of being negligible, or there might be some accountability for them from promoting a vaccine or a product that was unsafe?
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting. ScoMo, Scott Morrison, he's so quick to bleat, oh, I never mandated anything. I mean, he's whiter than white, the old ScoMo. And of course, all our premiers, where have they gone? They vaporized. All the people who are complicit with what's happened. And I was listening to Elizabeth.
Unfortunately, the chief health medical officers, they're still around. They're still getting their paychecks.
Oh, what about the one over in South Australia who said, don't catch the football in case you get COVID? I mean, honestly, we look back on this and it was so hilarious. But look, just getting back to this, I have to say, these pharmacists who I'm inclined to visit when I'm feeling a bit liverish, which is quite frequently when I'm getting new PDFs. Anyway, you go into the pharmacist, and I actually think, one of them said to me, oh, I've got insurance that covers any problems. So I said, oh, it's okay if you kill people. Is it, you're going to be covered. What they don't realise is that the premiers are vaporised. ScoMo, of course, is absolutely squeaky clean. Who's going to be left holding the baby? It's going to be the man with the syringe. And I actually believe that they're going to be the ones held accountable. And they're gaily taking their, $100? I think it's $100 a doctor gets, and I'm not sure how many the pharmacists get. I don't think it's quite that much. But they're still going with alacrity, even though they know it's not right. So they must be money-driven.
I know that you've confronted some of them about this point. I
always say it.
How do they react?
Well, when I went round Warriewood, it was when that marvellous woman in New Zealand had just exposed what was going on. And I actually made one of the pharmacists watch one of her videos saying that he was liable. Well, the colour ran from his face quite quickly. But mostly they get, they're either aggressive or dismissive. But every now and then I've encountered one who's actually a true believer in vaccine. I went into one place. He was in Melbourne, actually, that one. I don't just confine myself to to Sydney. Better watch out when I go to London next. I'll have to sway through the chemists in London as well. But anyway, no, this particular pharmacist, he was really upset. He said, oh, but all my staff and I are vaccinated, and I vaccinated my whole family. So he is a true believer. And I do meet them. Can I tell you about the nurses? The nurses. Look, this is honestly dystopia. We were at Coleroy a couple of weeks ago, and this nurse, she would have been about 55-ish. She was looking at the PDFs, and she wandered over and wanted to chat. And I said, what do you think about this? And she said, well, I've had 4 vaccinations and I got COVID. And she said, I thought I was going to die. I was really, really, really sick. And I said, well, what did that make you think? She said, oh, I wondered whether the vaccine worked. And I said, well, do you think it did? And she said, no. Anyway, I said, and she said, I'm a nurse, and we've all had 4 vaccinations. It was mandatory, and they're going to push another one apparently soon. So she's going to get the flu and the next COVID one in one whack. So I'm sorry for her. But I said, aren't you noticing an uptick in heart attacks and strokes? And it was almost sort of like a light bulb moment. She said, oh, yeah, it's busy. But no one says anything. And I think that she actually hadn't put it all together until she saw the forest. I really don't think she'd put it together. But the people who do get really angry with me, and I try not to get angry back, sometimes not very successfully, are the doctors. The doctors are sometimes, I met a man at Manly Beach. He was a visitor from Britain and a doctor, and his wife was mortified by his behaviour, I have to say, which was really over the top. But he said to me, oh, you just like attention. This is something that someone else said to me once. And I looked at them and I thought, have you any idea what's entailed with printing out 800 stories, laminating them, sticking them together on a stick and taking them to beaches for a few hours every weekend? Is this because I want attention? I'm not short of things to do, really. It's almost ludicrous to have these accusations made at you. Now, don't be put off doing a forest because of that, because it's so fulfilling. And, if you've got a group of people doing it together, you can actually get it done, quite quickly. But I just find it extraordinary that people don't have any critical thought, and they think that this is something I'm doing for attention seeking.
I've heard that people have threatened to call the police on you for these Forest of the Fallens.
No. Oh, yes. Not on me. Not on me. You tell the story.
Well, that was in Mossman. Someone did call the police, and a couple of detectives came down and
detectives.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Not just the cop on the street.
No. And there was I was only tangentially involved in the conversation. I mostly sort of stood back, and it was, I think, you and Miles.
I wasn't there that particular day.
Okay. So it was Miles. So anyway, they just it's probably one of the most asleep areas in the northern beaches, Mossman. Although actually there was one doctor who I talked to that day who was one of the people who did realize what's happened and said it was the biggest regret of her life that she got her family vaccinated.
That's the saddest.
That is.
Obviously, when you see one of these Forest of the Fallens, it is overwhelming.
Totally.
Because there are so many stories that people can't deny that this is happening. They try. I'm sure they do. But when you watch people go through and quietly read these stories, what is the overwhelming reaction that you get from people? Actually, I know there's all different types of reactions that you get.
All kinds of different reactions. So some people, they go and they read one or the other, and but there are some people who they walk up to it, and as soon as it's kind of like, you ever watch one of those vampire movies where someone has a cross and they go some they do that. They look at that and they kind of rush away, as if
there is an element of that. Actually, one of the curious things I've seen a lot, because women love walking in groups on beaches, you often see 3 women walking along the beach together. And I've seen this, I would say half a dozen times, that one of the women is the leader of the threesome, and they see what's happening, and often the person who's the most assertive will say, oh, they're anti-vaxxers. And of course, if I get a chance to say anything, I'll say, well, shame they weren't. They wouldn't be in this terrible position if they'd been anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting dynamic. And what often happens is the leader woman leads the second person on, and they leave, but there often is someone who's just dying to have a look, who's really curious and is feeling as though they can't look because the herd mentality is such. And this herd mentality is another very interesting factor of what's happened. People are really terrified of standing out from the crowd and not being part of a big group. It's a gene I missed somehow. I've never particularly felt that I had to conform, and it's a sad business because so many people have conformed and they've paid a terrible price for it. They've been frightened that they'll be ostracized socially. I've had plenty of social ostracism. I've been called anti-vaxxer. And I'm at the point now where people can call me what they like. It just does not worry me one little bit.
Well, you are getting some love. Kevin says, "What a wonderful lady this. What a wonderfully lovely lady this is."
Thank you,
In
Kevin.
fact, all the people involved in this are wonderful. Thank you so much for all that you are doing.
Thank you, Kevin.
Do you get many people come up and say thank you?
Oh, yeah. I would say now we are getting far more people coming up and saying thank you and thank God someone's speaking. So Selkie in Tasmania, the lady who started this, you are really, really a special person. And I really would encourage everyone who feels like we do, and I think there are more of us, to make contact and to start doing a forest locally. It works. It works. It's gentle. It's kind, and it is. It's very emotional, and you'll all cry. There are always tears. Almost every time we do this, there are tears.
But you feel like you have to do something. I mean, in the face of such damage, such complicity, such, I don't know exactly what to call it. I have to say, getting out and actually doing something is exactly. Extremely cathartic. And you meet other people who, like yourself, have come out and tried to do something, and that sense of camaraderie, you
so
can't
special.
Can't beat it.
The other thing is that our children are getting 53 vaccines before they go to school, and this is another little curly subject.
And they hold it over the parents, saying you're not going to get into childcare, and you're not going to be able
and CSL, who everyone seems to think is so marvelous, Brian McNamee is the chairman of that. He's just been given the Order of Australia, I think it was, for making AstraZeneca, which has killed people. And now he's getting subsidies from the government to make the biggest mRNA factory in the Southern Hemisphere. I mean, you can't make this
Isn't
stuff
that
up.
incredible? They're getting subsidies. CSL is one of the biggest, possibly the biggest company in Australia. If you go and look at their share price, it's hundreds of dollars.
And this man has just been given an Order of Australia, and the vaccine that he was distributing has injured half the people and killed some of our friends at the forest. I find it extraordinary that our government, I suppose it's all smoke and mirrors and people don't know, but I'm telling you now that's what's happening. And this mRNA is going to be in all the injections now. So I'm warning parents as well. I mean, so many pregnant mums come up and have a look at this, and they should never have vaccinated pregnant women. It was an absolute crime against humanity. In fact, I met someone at the Australian Medical Professionals the other day, most wonderful man. He was a gynecologist. He said he's seeing the fertility problems and the miscarriages now. It is a crime. And I really do want to reiterate that any parent with small children, I would be very, very wary of taking anything. And this new RSV vaccine they're bringing out, I understand, has got mRNA in it. Words fail me. So I think this whole vexed vaccination question needs a huge amount of investigation before we inject any more of our children. And to give a child up to the age of 6, I mean, when they're 18 months old, they get whacked with 8 diseases. What little body weighing 25 kilos or something, what small child's body can cope with that? And it makes no sense. A newborn child, the moment it's from the womb, is given an injection that's for people on drugs and having sex.
Hepatitis B vaccine.
Yeah, hepatitis B. And can I just continue on?
Yeah, sure.
I'm getting carried away. But anyway, I have a friend who was going overseas, And she made the mistake of going to her doctor the Monday before she was going, and he gave her 6th COVID injection mixed with shingles and the flu and Hep B and Hep A, I think it was. And the poor darling, she was all of 55 kilos, and she's an elderly lady.
Hang on.
She was given 5 vaccines in one hit.
On the one day.
On the one day. And she was, colour me surprised, she was unwell. And I just thought, why would anyone do that to someone?
It's almost, well, how do you even put that into words and how to comprehend that?
I can't.
I mean, where's the accountability on the doctor? Is there any?
Well, I'd say you got $1,000 for all those injections.
I mean, 10 years ago, I have to say I was naive to the damage that vaccines can do. I thought it was kind of like a software patch. It was kind of benefit without cost. But what we've come there now, the mRNA is a special kind. Let me cover that first. One of the things that we're learning about the mRNA is, first, it biodistributes throughout the entire body, right? There's also something called frame shifting, where they basically, a number of the particles of mRNA are like, 1 bit off of what they should be. So they're actually making your body print proteins that are random garbage as opposed to what they were intended to. And then there's the DNA contamination that Kevin McKiernan found out. The Florida Surgeon General basically wrote to the FDA and said, until you can prove to me that there isn't a problem with DNA contamination in these, I'm going to suspend the shots in Florida. And they couldn't write back to him with any data showing that DNA contamination didn't take place.
Well, we know that vaccines normally would take 10 years to be tested thoroughly.
Right.
We're still obviously within that 10-year period. Are they still being tested now?
We're being tested.
We are the test. Yeah.
And not surprisingly, they didn't want anyone to know anything about this. Well, Pfizer wanted all their information covered for 75 years.
Now, we've got another comment from Peter. Peter says, people like yourselves that are knowingly putting yourselves at risk for the greater good are the unsung heroes. So, Paul
Thank you, Peter.
and Rosemary.
Look, just remember there are 144 more forests. It's not just us, and also, so much help, so many wonderful people.
If anyone is watching this and they say, "Well, I haven't seen a forest of the fallen in my area. I would like to start one." Is it easy to do so?
Yeah, contact Selkie. Go to Forest of the Fallen official. And contact her and get onto it, because really the frustration of not being able to tell people and share our concerns is beyond frustrating, and it's tremendous balm to the soul to be with other people. You'll find very quickly you get the camaraderie in a crew together.
Yes,
I mean, we've got a great crew.
Yes,
it's
beautiful people.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this Saturday is going to be wet. I'm hoping to do one on Sunday, but I don't quite know where we're going to go this Sunday.
Do you announce them beforehand?
Just before. It's very weather dependent on the beaches. If it's wet, there's no point. Even though actually we did have one wet day where we were down at Bayview Dog Park, and it was great actually, because Phil Schultz turned up. You'll see Phil Schultz, his video on the Instagram page. Phil Schultz is a very, very wonderful guy. His brother Barry was one of the top doctors. He was a baby doctor in Adelaide. He was known as Dr. Baby. And this wonderful man, he was 76, but vibrant and energetic, and still, I think he even operated on a child the day before his life went to hell. But he looked after pregnant women, and they were frightened of being seen by an obstetrician who wasn't vaccinated. So he literally took one for the team. He would not allow his staff to be mandated, but he took the Pfizer injections, and tragically he started having problems very soon after, culminating, terrible story, but I'm going to say it because these stories are shocking. He sat up in bed and vomited blood and had a brain hemorrhage, and he died a couple of days later. And his wife, who clearly can you imagine the trauma of that, she sadly had a stroke not long after. But they're very keen for us to talk about this, and Phil gave a marvellous testimonial, which you can see on the official page. So heartfelt. I saw him the other day at the Australian Medical Professionals, and he was telling me how he had a melanoma suddenly pop up on his neck, so he's feeling a bit worried too. But
we're focusing, and the Forest of the Fallen focuses on people that have died or had serious injury, but there are a lot of people out there that probably have had very subtle reactions that have impacted on their lives. I mean, they're not being heard at all, are they?
Well, I met a young girl last weekend, and she was a little bit hostile, but she did say to me that she felt really, really tired all the time. So I told her to get onto the FLCCC protocol, which is nattokinase with bromelain and curcumin.
I've done that,
I just said, look, please don't worry that you're going to be really sick or anything, because you're young and you're healthy, and our bodies are amazing with what they deal with. So she will get onto that and make sure that she gets her immune system up again, I hope.
So one of the key things about these injections is they distract the immune system. There's a lot of, like, one of my good friends got reactivation of chickenpox, so he got shingles. So within a few weeks of the vaccination, this exploding pain in his face and swelling. But it's not just shingles that can reactivate. It can be Epstein-Barr, which gives the chronic fatigue, or other viral or fungal reactivations, which then drain the body of resources. So this is one of the things about vaccines, which we come to understand, particularly with the mRNA vaccines, which cause your body to print spike proteins for actually much longer than they said. They stabilized a particular part of the spike protein so that it doesn't break down the way they said it would. So not only does it biodistribute, but it also endures quite a long ways. They've found it, I think, at least 60 days out, and then they ended that trial. But actually, there was another study where it was even beyond that. So during that time, your body has got to clean up this mess. It's kind of like, if you have your body is always taking care of, cancer cells, fungal, all the things that are, it's keeping in check in your body all the time. And then you put a 5-alarm fire in your arm, and then wherever it goes, and your body has to distribute resources that it normally is keeping all these things in check to what you've just injected into yourself. And that's how you end up getting these dysbiosis, this reactivation of latent viruses, or even your inability to suppress cancer the way you used to. So, again, and that's one of those things where there isn't official recognition that there's a tie between rise in cancer rates and vaccines. And if they wanted to do the statistics, they could. But the dog that didn't bark shows you that they don't want to know. They're not going to, even though it's a hugely important topic, they're not distributing the research money to find this out because they don't want the answer.
It's a funny thing, the immune system. I know a lot of people assume that when they get sick, it's the virus making them sick. It's actually the immune system that is making you sick to get rid of whatever it's trying to get rid of. And a lot of people will notice that when they're always working, and they're always busy, and then they finally have a holiday and they stop, they'll get sick because that's the immune system catching up and saying, okay, now I've got time to get rid of the things that I need to get rid of. So it can get distracted by other things, and then other things can become problematic. So
the immune system activates and then goes after what it needs to go
yes
after. But if you're giving it these injections, it's going off one important detail to go on a different job. And that's
yes. I got a comment from Lee, who's as we said before, watching in Europe. He's and I know Lee's connected with a lot of politicians and media and everything. He's asking, how do we get all these anecdotal stories that you're telling to him so he can publish it to the politicians, media, and everyone?
Oh, I'm happy to talk anytime, Lee.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, someone sent to me today the submission for the inquiry into excess deaths, and being the computer idiot that I am, I tried to work it and managed to send them a blank email. So, but it's very frustrating because anything to do with the government is made so complicated. I'm not completely illiterate with computers, but it defeated me, and I just thought they really don't want to hear. They don't want to hear, and they made it as difficult as they could to find the submission form and then to deal with the submission form. But I'd just like to speak about the media, if you don't mind.
Well, let me just quickly read a comment. This is from Catherine, because there's a lot of people, a lot of people have stories.
Oh, yeah.
And she said that my 20-year-old daughter took them for school leavers back in 2021, ended up in hospital in November 2023. All those with heart issues were under 30.
Actually, that is so sad, because I have I did have a Facebook friend who was a nurse, and she worked on a cardiology ward, and she said that she was seeing, this is going back 2 years, she was saying that nearly everyone in there was young, mostly young men, and they all had heart conditions. And I said, well, are you saying something? Her response was, I'm just about to get my superannuation. I'm not prepared to speak.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So this is something that's really just holding people back.
Yeah.
But you wanted to speak about the media.
Well, this is just a little bit of a story. We were up at Whale Beach, and this charming elderly man came over, and it was a sort of a vignette of what's gone wrong with the media, I think. He and his wife, they were absolutely delightful. And he was telling me how he had believed in the injections until he saw Forrest, and he was absolutely shocked. And rather touchingly, he thought that I was some sort of heroine, until I told him there were 144 other people doing what I was doing. He realised that we're a job lot trying to get the word out. Anyway, he'd been Jim Cairns' right-hand man during the Vietnam War, which, of course, if people remember, anyone who was anti-war back in the 70s was considered just so far below acceptable. So he was someone who was right out there from the get-go, and he said to me, he's written books. Lovely, lovely man. Jonathan King's his name, and I enjoyed meeting him, and he was so kind. Anyway, he still had a lot of contacts in the media, but I look back on this sort of interlude with him, and I realised that he was still under the impression that we had investigative journalists who were brought up through the journalism industry by the hardcore editors who, if you didn't tell the truth in a story, you were out. Well, we now have this bunch of woke adolescent type kids who come through some ghastly journalism school, and they think that their opinion is the truth, half of which is completely out of order and so naive and lacking any wisdom whatsoever. And anyway, this dear man, he said, rest assured, I've still got contacts, and I'm going to give your details. And he took my number and took my details and took a photo of me and said, this person's the person to speak to about the injuries that we're seeing in the death. And we had a couple of text messages in between, and I felt so, at the time I knew, I thought, I'm not going to disappoint him and say nothing will come of this. But I could just tell it sank like a stone in murky waters for him. And it must have been a terrible disappointment, because he was someone who made a difference back in his day, and he had the help of having investigative journalists on his side. And I think he must have been so disappointed in the whole industry. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing cowards. Yeah. We're seeing the media are full of cowards. I just find them despicable. How about that?
Well, you can put, as you said, you can put the media and the politicians in the same lot, can't you? Because
can we put a few more in there?
Go for it. Go for it.
The doctors who comply, the nurses who know and don't speak up, and my favourite, the pharmacists, because they make so much money and they get $2,500 for every sandwich board they have.
Catherine's saying that there is independent media, and they print it in the Light newspaper.
Yes,
so.
Yes,
that's very true.
The Light paper is my Bible. I love it.
The Light
it's
paper is
wonderful.
Yeah,
but the Epic Times is the only other one that I can think of that's been good on this.
I tell you, the other thing that I like watching is UK column news, and that's partly where Jackie Devoy comes in on it. She's a journalist in England who has been very big in exposing the Midazolam murders. There's so much that people aren't aware of. You say about the Midazolam murders and people just look blank. But what was happening was that ghastly little ferret, that Matt Hancock, who was the you
have such a way with words.
Ghastly little ferret. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to restore that.
Yeah. Well, he ordered as much midazolam as the French company who makes it could provide, to enable people to have a peaceful death, apparently. This was back in 2019. And he was actually asked in Westminster, have you made provision for comfortable deaths? And so, yes, he brought that up. And then as soon as the COVID disaster was announced, all the elderly people were moved out of hospitals and put into old people's homes. And of course, the treatment there, I mean, having survived pericarditis and pneumonia, which is basically what COVID would have progressed to had it been allowed. If you weren't giving medication in time, obviously a secondary infection is in your lungs, and that's when you get pneumonia. And that's what happened to me. Anyway, of course, the first thing they do is give you antibiotics. It was really strange what happened in England. There were very few antibiotics being prescribed, but there was lots of midazolam.
That's right.
Catherine says, ghastly little ferret. That's going in my lexicon.
Mhm.
But you mentioned Dr. Philip Altman and how he's a hero.
Mm.
But during the state election here in New South Wales, he also ran for Parliament. So he stepped into the political realm. But have you mentioned Sophie Scamps, have you approached any other politicians, or have you had any other politicians listen to you or try and support you or anything like that?
I've approached, every time I see a politician, I approach them. I did approach another politician. In fact, a group of us went outside the office of a particular politician and we were objecting to the fact that Chris Minns, who's our Labor Premier, was celebrating the fact that the elderly can spell Croquenbush in their spelling bee, but he's not worried about the fact that they're dying of these injections. So I was outside this particular politician's office. Well, I won't call him Little Ferret. I could think of other things to call him. Anyway, we were outside there, and there was a group of us, and I was saying this, to this particular person, you could actually be on the right side of history, and it's your opportunity to throw the Labor Party into the hot water. Perhaps now is the time to speak up. Anyway, I went into the office and saw his staff. He was away at the time, and they asked me my name, and of course I told them. So we had this little film, and it's actually Dr. Altman put that on his Substack, I think. Anyway, no sooner did I get to the car than I got the no ID phone call on my mobile phone. I answered the phone, and it was, I don't know, I think he was Chief Constable, someone or other. He said, "Oh, is that Rosemary Marsh?" And I said, "Oh, yes, that's me." And he said, "Were you just outside of Mr. X's office?" "Oh, yes, that was me." And he said, "Well, why did you do that?" And I said, "Because people like you were mandated to take these experimental injections, and I do something called Forest of the Fallen, and we have a number of your colleagues who've had to go anonymously because if they speak up, they'll lose their jobs. And I represent the people in your cohort who've been hurt, injured, died, along with everyone else who's been hurt by these vaccinations." And I basically gave him my little spiel, which now I can repeat off the top of my head in about 10 minutes. And he said, "Thank you. And next time you do it, let us know so we can make sure you do it safely." So people can call the police, but the police are actually on our side because they've been hurt too.
That's right. And I guess the sad or disappointing thing is a lot of people that may come across a Forest of the Fallen probably don't come up to you. They want to keep to themselves. They may be shy. They may not know how to approach it. The vast majority of people out there may be holding these thoughts to themselves, but they're not expressing them, where we need people to express their thoughts.
Well, funny you should say that. I actually had coffee with someone. It was a random meeting. We actually had it's a bit of a funny story. We have this mutual friend on Facebook who drives us both mad, and we decided to meet and discuss what a crazy he thinks that Joe Biden is the shining example of everything perfect, and that Hillary Clinton would have been a good, So, needless to say, this poor man, he suffers under our comments. But we decided we'd have a quick coffee, and it turned out that he said, "I see you've got a lot to say about the vaccine." And I said, "I've got plenty to say about that." And he said, "Well, I've got myocarditis from it." And I said, "Well, what are you going to do about that?" And he said, "Oh, well, what can I do?" And I think there are a lot of people who are like that, who have got this problem and they know it's from the vaccine. And again, I repeat, it's a sort of sad resignation. But this is where we have to start making sure everyone speaks up and making people feel confident that they won't be told that it's in their imagination. Oh, I want to talk about my friend talking about
open platform for you to get all your stories out.
Are you getting sick of the sound of my voice?
No, not at all.
Oh, I'm surprised. I can go on a bit. Anyway, when we were working for Dr. Altman, actually, Dr. Altman and I spent a lot of time walking up and down the Manly foreshore talking to people. And, you know, this gentleman, and he is truly one of nature's gentlemen, he is someone with so much experience and such a broad understanding of the whole pharmaceutical industry. And we'd bump into these young female doctors. I remember one day we met 3 of them, and they were so rude to him. They just said, well, we believe in the vaccine. And I thought at the time, you know, there was always a bit of merit in listening to the older, wiser people, and these women will live to regret it. But just continue on this, because Dr. Altman was on the platform of trying to get the terrible stories of the vaccine injured out there, which was the reason he actually stood for Manly. In the course of that, I met this beautiful young man, 23, in the army, in the ADF, and in his cohort of 40, 15, they all had Pfizer, and 15 of them were vaccine damaged. And this particular young man, who I've got a special place in my heart for, my poor pericarditis heart, but it's a very special place for this boy, he got a really bad case of myocarditis. And I spoke to him last week, and he's just had his appendix out and he's in hospital. His life has been destroyed. And he's just such a lovely, lovely young man. It's so wrong what's happened. And I often say when we're having one of our little videos, this is for this particular boy, and, you know, I'll try not to cry, but he said, don't forget me, Rosie. I promise I won't. I won't forget that one.
This is one of those things that, you know, we don't have time for cowards in politics. You know, I mean, the you know, what we need is accountability and transparency, and for someone to look into these things and not just sit back, cover their asses and hope that it'll all go away, because it's not going to go away.
No.
And what we need is, you know, some courage. Now, this is one of those things for people from our point of view. If someone comes late to the game and says, ooh, I'm sorry, I will, you know, I'm going to look into this. We need to be welcoming and say, okay, yes, later than we would have wished, but help us, because we need to have this out in the open and start healing. And you know, and I mean, because like you say, we're still injecting people. I think the Northern Beaches Council, when I checked two months ago, I called up and said, well, you know, if I have a son who wants to be a lifeguard, do you have a vaccine mandate for COVID? And they said yes.
Worse still, or if you have a child who's got, this is my understanding, I again, this is anecdotal, but I wasn't corrected when I said this to Dr. Sophie Scamps. My understanding is if you have an asthmatic 5-year-old, your GP could well recommend you give that child a COVID injection because they're considered immune compromised. Well,
it's nuts.
It is insane. It is insane.
I've said from the beginning that everyone had a very, very difficult decision to make, whether you got the vaccine or didn't get the vaccine or whatever it might have been. We really didn't know what was going to happen.
Agreed.
And some people took it willingly and happily, and other people like us pushed back and said no way, and we were willing to walk through the fire of whatever that might have been at that time, because we didn't know where this was going to lead to. But it was a very, very difficult decision. So you get some people sometimes and they'll be like, oh, all the vaccinated people will be dead in 10 years. So, you know,
No,
I've never subscribed to that way of thinking, because there are a lot of people that took the vaccine and they were forced into doing it. They didn't know what they were doing, and how do we really know we made the right decision at the end of the day? Everyone was lied to. Everyone was forced into very difficult decisions. Yep. We are all in the same boat. It's not us versus them. The only people that we need to hold accountable are the ones that were pushing this stuff.
Yeah, the mandators.
Yes.
The ones who've lied. Look, it's something like 7% of these vaccines are troublesome. And when you think about it, they had to be kept at such a cold temperature.
Sorry, just hold the microphone.
Oh, sorry. And also, you weren't supposed to jiggle them around. Well, can you imagine Australia Post? Would they have managed that? They would have been jiggled around, hot, cold, taking them out to Kalgoorlie and injecting people. They probably had absolutely nothing of any substance left in them. So that's what I cling to, because near and dear people to me have taken these and they do seem fine. So I refuse to go down that path. And
it's hurt so many people. We're focusing on the people that have been directly hurt by this, but there's so many people that have been indirectly hurt: mothers, fathers, children, spouses, people that are associated to people that have died. Like if you lose a husband or a wife or a child or whatever it might have been because of one of these injections, I mean, sometimes there's worse things in life than death.
And the relationship breakdowns.
That's what I was going to.
Yeah, Mike Eden, who was the second in command at Pfizer, he spoke out very early on because he realised that something was very wrong. He has a sister in Adelaide. Shout out to Mike Eden's sister in Adelaide. Your brother's an actual hero, and apparently she completely shuns him, and he's so hurt about it. And he's been a wonderful man, Mike Eden. He's really, really done his best to get the word out to stop any more of this, and he truly believes that there's been malfeasance.
Well, this has also been a problem in some primary relationships, husbands and wives whose relationship died because one person can see, oh, well, you can't test something at the wrong dose and at the wrong time and say you've tested it, and the other person's calling them names and saying follow the science as if that was a thing. So, you know, all three of us, I am absolutely sure, have lost friends over this.
Lots.
Some of us have lost
but I've made
family.
some special ones.
That's it.
Well,
Family members.
Thankfully, I maybe I just don't hold a big friend circle. Thankfully, I didn't lose.
You did lose your job, though.
I lost my job, but I've made so many friends out of this, and I've met so many incredible people like yourself, Rosemary, who have the courage to do this, and you've put a lot of effort into doing this.
Courage is contagious.
Well, it is. That's correct. Where do you plan on going with all of this? How long do you plan on holding these forests of the fallen?
Until they stop doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'll think of something else to be annoyed about. No doubt something else will get right up my nose and I'll be furious again.
Got a comment here from Lee. Lee's still watching. Thank you, Lee. He says, please thank your guests. So genuine and sincere, and they should be thanked for what they do. Proud that none of my teams chose to be vaccinated despite pressure.
Oh, well done, your team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well done. And thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I'm very grateful for, and this is one of the things, you know, it's been an absolutely upside down world, just shocking these last few years, but I have met the coolest people. And it's only in difficult times that you get to see courage in people to step up, and you know, seeing that and it has been inspiring, and it's yeah, I'm very grateful.
The last 4 years have changed us all.
Yes.
It's changed us all profoundly. Some for good and some not so good.
Yeah.
But now's the time we all should get together again. And that's what Forest is about. Forest is about crediting the people who tried hard but got the short straw.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge their grief and what's happened to them, and make sure my real beef is the medical profession won't recognize what's happened to these people, because to be so unwell, I mean, some of the latest lot of PDFs, there was one young woman who had so many multiple problems. Her life was literally hell on steroids, and for her not to have it attributed to the vaccine when it was so clearly, baldly the truth.
Gaslight.
I mean, that is the ultimate of cruelty, to be feeling that unwell and still told, oh, well, it's in your mind, or this is bad luck. That is just beyond the pale in every way.
And I think what's important about what you guys do at Forest of the Fallen, it's very apolitical. You don't have someone standing on a soapbox yelling at everyone. You just put the sticks in the ground. You have the laminated pieces of paper there with the stories on there, and then people come up on their own free will to read these stories. You're not pushing anyone into it. You're not forcing it upon anyone. You're not sticking it outside of anyone's office or anything like that. It's on an open space. People are welcome to come up and view it at their own in their own time, and it's not forceful in any way.
I wish actually it was political, because the fact that it's apolitical is because all the major parties are complicit in this.
Yeah. And I would like to. Sorry.
Yeah, please. No.
Well, ScoMo did buy 310 million doses of this rubbish, didn't he? Which I think was probably not the wisest thing because it cost us $18 million. Oh, and by the way, at this meeting the other day, turns out that he had such confidence in these crooks who were giving us these vaccines. I think he must have overlooked the fact that I think all these big pharma companies have been fined $116 billion for all the bad things they've done to the public, but apparently he didn't worry about that when he bought 310 million doses for it.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's beyond belief that these people are so ridiculous.
And we know these these pharmaceutical companies in the past are willing to cop the fine because they make so many profits out of it.
Well, but they were shielded from liability, entirely. So that was one of the things that they made sure is that regardless of anything that happened, they had all upside.
Squeaky clean. But look, can I be political and just say I'm so in awe of Gerard Rennick, Malcolm Roberts, Matt Canavan, Ralph Babette, and the people who are standing up, Alex Antic. We actually do have heroes here. We've got more heroes here than other countries have. The trouble is the media don't cover them. But overseas, in other countries, particularly on alternative media, our politicians are complete heroes. So just a really big shout out to those people who are fighting for us. And, they're such credible, intelligent men too. It's not like they're tinfoil hat wearing people who come up with random ideas. Everything they say is backed by statistics and honest truth.
Well, people like Craig Kelly and George Christensen and Jared Rennick as well.
John Ruddock.
Lost their seats in Parliament, and Craig Kelly was in he had a big margin in Hughes. I mean, he was in a safe Liberal seat. He could have stayed in Parliament on a cushy, salary for the rest of his days. Russell Broadbent is another one.
Say him, for Monash. Those people we really must support and recognise because they are going against what their party might prefer them to say. And they're living proof that if you're honest to yourself and tell the truth, the public must start seeing that these people are worth following and applauding and supporting and voting for.
Now, we're at the end. Is there any other stories or messages that you'd like to get out before we finish up?
Thank you for having me on. I hope I haven't been too outspoken.
No. Hopefully we can have you back in the future once you collect more stories on your travels.
Well, every weekend there's something more. But I hope there aren't going to be too many more in the future. I really do.
Yeah. No, well, thank you very much for everything that you're doing. I think everyone that's behind a Forest of the Fallen are doing incredible work. I remember the first time I saw it was down in Campbelltown, and they were doing one down there, and I was like, that's a very powerful message what they're trying to get across. And as I said, they're not being forceful with the way that they're doing it. They just put up their little sticks in the ground. It's just these little bamboo sticks, and then whoever's nearby are welcome to come up and view it. And people can walk by if they want to, but it's free.
Most don't.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's excellent. And if we should let everyone know, if you do want to get, we mentioned it before, if you want to head to the Forest of the Fallen website, you can click on the Contact Us button, and if you want to sign up and start doing your own Forest of the Fallen, they are very, very powerful, and they're easy to do. Quite, do you have a team that does it, or?
Well, we've got everything in place now. So, but I've got a team who come and help every weekend, and it's absolutely great having them. And thank you to all those who do. My husband, I should say thank you to my husband, because he drags a bag of the sticks around all over the beaches, and he's Dutch and he's a bit blunt, so I don't let him speak to the public. I think less from him the better. But we've got Tom and Paul and George and Marty, and they're regulars. And then, of course, we have all the people from the like-minded families around the northern beaches. They come and help. And the beauty of that is, we all turn up and they'll just wander around, kind of looking at the sticks and talking to people. So it makes people not feel intimidated to come and look. If other people are looking, they don't feel so intimidated.
And what I suggest for everyone who's watching, if you do know that there's a Forest of Fallen coming up in your area, email your local member and say, there's going to be a Forest of the Fallen, you should go and look at this, and encourage the politicians to get out there and have a look. And the media, your local media, whoever you can contact, get in contact with them and let them know.
There has been the odd politician that's come there and scuttled past very quickly. I name names. I won't. Another ferret, anyway.
We better not. We better. Right. All right. So thank you very much, Rosemary. Thank you, Paul, again,
Thank
as
you very
always.
much for having me.
And for everyone watching, thank you very, very much for watching this. For everyone that's contributed in the chat, thank you very much. It does add a lot to what we do here. Hearing the feedback from our audience is very, very important. And if I say it on every single episode, can you please share this? Please share this out. I mean, Rosemary has got a lot of stories, and as we said, even though they are anecdotal, they are still very powerful. They're expressed to you in a lot of truth. I'm sure. I'm sure people aren't just coming up to you making up these stories. So
No. I'm on Twitter now, but I don't know how to work it.
okay, well that's probably a good.
I'll have to learn.
That's probably a good segue. How do people follow? Are you on Facebook or?
Well, I am on Facebook, but it's just my page. I'm wearing the same top that I wear on Facebook.
Okay.
So you'd be able to see which one I am. But I have to work out some other way of doing it rather than that because.
Okay, so just type in Rosemary Marshall. And
well, I think I'm Rosemary, then brackets Rosie Marshall. But look, I will do something more. I'll have to take advice because I'm not very good on social media. In fact, I've tried to avoid it pretty much.
I would say just try and do more media and podcasts where you can. I think that's where your strength is, speaking, because you're very articulate and you speak from the heart. It's very genuine, and I think that gets across to people.
I'm happy to talk to anyone about forests. So if anyone wants to contact me, please feel free, or contact.
Yep, contact.
I'm happy for you to give them my number if they want to talk.
Yeah, well, just email me info@xcandidates.com. I've got the thing here, I think. So that ticker at the bottom, if you email us at info.xcandidates@gmail.com. And if you want to reach out to Rosemary, if you're part of the media or you want to get in contact with someone in the media or get in contact with a politician, whoever.
Rupert Murdoch, please, you can have my number. I'll speak with you.
Just email us and I'll pass the details on to Rosemary.
And if you do, as a politician, come out and make it right, we'll change your name from ferret to non-ferret.
Oh, yes.
And we'll have you on the podcast as well and give you a nice little plug.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure to have you on. So, as I said, please share this out far and wide. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you all next time. Thank you.